And let's just take a quick look at where we are. So this is the landing page in D2L for our class. You should feel free to check this if you need to get landed or grounded on what's going on. And it's good to keep track of. So you can see right over here, there are 2 overdue assignments. The discussion group, which is this one, didn't show up right the first time on the front page. It was in the description. A couple of people missed it. And the trouble with the discussion group is when it ends, the group gets closed. So I put it back there with an end date of September 17th, and I sent out email to the few students who hadn't participated just to ask you to finish it and pick up the points. They're just easy points. You could take 5 minutes, 10 minutes and complete that.
But if we did it, then our responses are still there.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. No, it didn't wipe anything out. It just allowed people to continue to contribute. If you read the instructions, it says that part of the assignment is to reply to at least 2 other posts. Again, no big deal. We're not looking for English paper quality here. We're just interested in some participation in a discussion group. So don't make a big deal out of it. It's not. Assignment 1 was essentially a giveaway, more to make sure you had everything installed and running, and to write just a little bit of code. The assignment for Module 2, which was due yesterday, we gave you the stub of a program. Well, more than a stub. We probably gave you 75% of the solution and asked you to, so to speak, fill in the blanks to complete it. When I looked this morning, I had 17 responses to assignment 2 out of currently 20 students enrolled in the class. So we've lost a few, and 17 out of 20 is not bad. If it continues through the semester, I would say it's good. And of course, that's on you folks to make sure that you continue to submit these assignments. If you've not submitted assignment 1 and 2, I would say this is your week to say, I need some help. I think I used the analogy before. I'll just give it to you again quickly. This is a swimming pool kind of a class. You start out at the shallow end, which is Module 1. It gets a little deeper for Module 2, but we've still given you significant percent of the work. And by the time you get down to these modules, we don't give you any starting code, and you have to fabricate your own solution that's increasingly complex. I think it's also fair to say that the amount of time that will take to complete future modules will be more than the prior ones. So Module 3, due September 17th, kind of gets into a bigger picture, and that is I've already recorded a video for Module 3 and posted it. So you have that. And Module 3, I think, is pretty modest and not technically that complex. There's a bunch of details in there. There's some styling and aesthetics in there. But I wouldn't say it's a particularly complex module having to do with input and output. So by the end of today, depending on how we feel about it, we need to decide what to do about Wednesday. And we will talk about that and come up with a plan. As I've commented and complained to you, last week, Wednesday, was my second cataract surgery, which is why I have these funny looking glasses. Everything went fine. Distance vision is fine. Close-up screen vision is dubious, right now being helped just with plain ordinary magnifying reader glasses. So I might take an extra break to get my eyes back in. And at some point, I'll probably get glasses that serve me well over a wider range. So Wednesday's kind of up in the air. All right. So any questions on where we are logistically in the class? Not technical questions, but what are we doing and when are we doing it and those kinds of things?
Can you remind me when our first project is coming up? How many weeks?
And the answer is only if I look, but I can do that.
Yeah, I guess I could look too, but I figured it'd be good to point
Yeah,
out.
yeah, we can certainly talk about it. So there are 3 projects, and the answer is project 1 is not due until October 8th. So, you know what, some 3 weeks away or ish, something like that. Project 2, the end of October. And the final project, basically the end of the semester. So, as you know, those projects are worth more than the regular assignments. So you can't blow off a project. We've talked about it before. It's much better for you to submit something that's kind of meh than to blow it off and not submit anything. It's also really, really better off to start the sooner rather than the later, recognizing they will take time. And I think you're going to see that in Module 3. You've got some work to do in Module 3. Start working on it on Saturday or Sunday, it's a problem. And that may be part of our Wednesday discussion, how to not get you into that trap. Other questions? Okay. Remember, this is your class to ask questions. That's why we're here. So I have a blank piece of paper and a pencil, and I'm ready to listen to questions without any feeling that you should be too shy to ask them or that everybody knows the answer except me.
Okay, so the last project, or last thing that we just did, I tried to insert miles into a statement where it said my car can drive this many miles on a full tank of gas,
Right.
but it gave me a code that said you can't insert an integer. It has to be a string. But miles was already defined as an integer, like on its own. So I tried to redefine it as a string, and it still wouldn't accept it.
Okay.
So I had to
So I think the best way to answer this is in PyCharm. And let me show you what I did this morning. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I built a new project for our class. And I plan on putting in all the stuff from my class, for this class, either right here as a project. No, we're not going to do prime numbers. That was for somebody else. But when I copy over your assignments, I have a place to put them. And to help me today, I created a folder. So this is a symbol for a folder. Create a folder for September 11th. And in here, I can put my work. So you should be familiar with the fact that you can click on your project, right-click, and say New Directory or New Python file. Until we get later into the course, those are your only likely candidates for what you're trying to do. So if I want to create something in a directory, a subdirectory, I right-click and say I want a new, make sure you select Python file. And I don't have a particular name for this, so we're just going to call it Demo 1. And I'm going to be lazy. I'm not going to write a header or even a main function here. So tell me if I'm on the right track. I got to make that bigger. Print. And I tend to use single quotes. You can drive miles of gas. Okay. So does what you want to do involve inserting the value of a variable where my cursor is. Is
Yeah,
that the goal?
yeah,
So, it's real important to realize that what I want here is a variable. And what I've got here is a string. So, let me take the easy approach and just set miles equal to 300. And now I have a variable called miles. If I have any doubt about the value of this variable, I can hover over it, and PyCharm will tell me you have a variable named miles, which is an integer, and its current value is 300. Okay, so if I say something that you're not sure why I'm saying it or why it's true, just holler and tell me, could you explain where you are and what you're doing?
that's fine. When I had miles defined, I had miles defined as tank capacity times miles per gallon.
Okay, and that means that
But
that means I could back up. Capacity equals 15 mpg equals 25 miles equals capacity. And notice when I type the letter C, I get a list of possibilities. And if I like one that I see, I just double click. Capacity times mpg. And PyCharm says, hey, something's fishy here. There's a yellow squiggly. Would you like to reformat the file? And the answer is sure, you do the work. So is that more like where you were?
yeah,
All right. Now, before we go ahead, and I really want to answer your question, but before we go ahead, could you all take a look at what I've done here and ask me any questions you are curious about what are the variables, what are the literals, what's the calculation, how do these variables come into being, and what type of variable are they? And then we'll fix line 4. Okay.
the 1 and 2 are integers,
1 and 2 are certainly integers.
but the result of miles is going to be an integer.
It will be, yes.
And the message, so when I insert miles into the statement down there, like I did it with plus signs on both sides.
Okay. So let's do that. So everybody agree, well, okay. Let's get somebody new to answer the question. How many variables exist in this program?
Is it 3?
3 sounds right. And they happen to be in white. So there are 3 white things in this program. When does the variable capacity get its value? Does it have a value right now?
Yes.
Okay. What happens if I do this? One of the things you notice that happens is that it doesn't complete automatically. The other thing is there's a red mark over here. So what happened? Why is this not working?
Because you're printing it before you defined it.
Right. So right now, at this moment, all the variables have no value, so I can't use them. So easily enough, if I were to take this and put it under here, did I blow it? Probably. Now it will find it and it will print it. So I would say the most critical concept that we have in the class so far is the fact that variables that haven't been assigned a value can't be used. And that means two things. They can't be used on the right of the equal sign, and they can't be used as part of a function, which we want to do in line 4. How are they assigned a value? With an equal sign. Now, here's a question one of you, I think, knows the answer to, and it's an extra credit question. Can we create a variable without assigning it a value? Who's going for the extra credit?
In Python, no, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you're correct. You don't have to do it. The question was, can you do it? Now I'm suspicious because I saw this in somebody's solution. And of course, I don't remember whose. Take a look.
I think you can use the more sign and less than sign.
The what sign?
The more sign and less than sign. The
Greater than, less than?
yes, that one.
You can, but not to that extent. Now, I don't want to get too far into it right now, but if you hover over this variable, notice the notation that PyCharm gives you, capacity : int. Well, what about if I tried doing that on my own?
Yeah, I was thinking you might be able to set it as a type.
Right. And so what? Well, so maybe this is a good thing.
Yeah, now it's a float.
Now, it expected
Right.
an int and it got a float. So here's what makes Python different than the other languages. Yes, I get a warning, but I can still do it. So let's not get bogged down in that right now. Maybe we'll talk about it a little later. But these, which are called type hints, can be used, number one, to declare an intent, and number two, to declare a variable without assigning it a value. Okay. Other questions about what we have right now before we get down to the meat of this? So what we want is, or what you did was something like this. You can drive using single quote. Is that kind of what you did?
Yeah, that's exactly what I
And
did.
you kind of got this error. And
Uh, yeah,
it's,
unexpected integer, possible types. Yeah, that's the error I got.
yeah. And I don't know why it says string, if it's referring to strings on both sides or not. So here's what PyCharm is confused about. It knows that plus can mean addition or it can mean concatenation. Concatenation is a string operation stuffing things together, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to stuff the value of miles into a string by concatenating it to two other strings. Can't do that. So other languages do it a little differently, and they call it a cast. Here we just need a function, str. And str says, well, how do I know what str does? I hover over it, and it says it creates and returns a new object. And it really doesn't tell you exactly what it does. But anyway, it returns a string of whatever this is. So virtually anything can be turned into a string. I'm not sure if a Boolean can, but let's not get distracted. So now it's clear to PyCharm that my intent is to use the plus as concatenation because I'm concatenating three strings. If I run this.
I think I tried that and it told me that the value of the string was an integer and it wasn't acceptable. I thought, or
I'm
maybe,
skeptical.
okay.
You'd have to tell me what you did differently than what I did. Now, I can well, I think this appears to be the correct, a solution to this,
Yeah.
right? Any questions about why this is a solution or how I made it a solution? Alrighty. Now, I can't leave the topic without discussing why I don't like this solution, even though I wrote it. These plus signs are a pain in the neck. Opening and closing quotes is a pain in the neck. Figuring out where the spaces go is something you tend to forget. So I'd like to propose two alternatives. This is kind of the easiest one. Frequently, it's just easier to run something than it is to explain it and then go back to explain it. Okay, so I've achieved the same output without concatenation. So can somebody explain to me what's going on in line 5?
You're
Okay.
creating a list, right? Like it's,
No, I'm not.
okay.
What are the commas?
That's a fair question. Let me answer the question with another question. What is print? Print is a function, isn't it? You can, if you don't believe me, you can look it up, but trust me, it's a function. I can hover over it and it says, oh, it says lots of things and lots of colors that with my spectacles, I can even see. It is defined someplace, def, print. And we know it's a function because it has parentheses after it. And that function says that it will take parameters. In English, you'd say it would take a bunch of values. Star values means it will take 0 or more values, comma separated. Now, I could say a comma separated list, but it's not a list in the Python sense. It's comma separated things. And those things are objects. Well, what does it also take? It also takes SEP, which stands for separated, which is a string, and file, and something called flush, which is for much later on. So what I've done is I've passed parameters to a Python function. And the way to separate the parameters is to use commas. The recommended syntax is to put a space after the comma. And PyCharm will help you. So if I do this, PyCharm says, you're missing a white space after a comma, just hit reformat, bingo, you're there. So one important takeaway here is let Python tell you what's wrong and let Python make the corrections. You know, how easy can it be? Or how hard can it be to let Python make these corrections? So nothing in the little pop-up says that the objects have to be of the same type. It just says, give me 0 or more values. So we gave it a string. I don't know, I guess that won't tell us it's a string. This will tell us it's an int, and here's another string. So there's another way of doing business. The picky people might notice that these two came out exactly the same. And my question is, where did the spaces come from in the second case? Anybody want to guess? Why is there a space after the word drive and before the word miles?
Is that a print behavior? Is that just a function
Yeah,
of print?
yeah, the print, you know, print is not a sacred piece of code. It's probably written in Python. And it says that between these parameters, give me a space. So it has nothing to do with this. That's not where the space came from. Although that's poor style, it still runs and it gives you the same output. So you want to go for style, and that's the correct style. All right. Trying to think how much, well, I want to take this one more step. I'm trying to decide if I want to take it one more step or two more steps. Definitely want to take it one more step. I don't like this technique. And I'm not crazy about line 4 either. And as I think I've said to you, programmers are a very prejudiced bunch of people in that they have favorite ways of doing things and like to tell everybody that their way is right and any other way is wrong. That applies to languages, and it also applies to techniques within a language. So this is the technique that I like, and it's called an F string. I notice some of you have used it, yay. And an F string is just a clever way of combining literals and variables. So let's do it. Literally, you can drive space, curly braces. Here's an autocomplete for miles. Miles on a tank of gas. And I've saved a space. Yay. Now what's PyCharm complaining about? It wants a new line at the end of the file. Says who? Says PEP8. What's PEP8? A document that describes Python styling. Okay, if you're so smart, you fix it. Now I have a blank line at the end of the file. I'll run the program, and the answer is exactly the same. But wait, there's more. That's a line from cheesy advertisements for products that dice and slice and do all kinds of things. What else can I do inside the curly braces? Obviously, they're special. Plain text is green, inside the curly braces is white. Well, I'm going to say inside the curly braces, not only can you get the value of a variable, you can get you can have it execute an expression like capacity times MPG. No complaints except for the blank line at the end of the file. Run it. And there we are. Okay, now I'm not going to show it because I don't like it, because I'm prejudiced. I'm not going to show you the .format method. Number one, it's described in the class. Number two, I consider it to be kind of obsolete, but it kind of accomplishes the same thing. Now, there's more I can say, but I don't want to close you guys out of your question and answer time. So questions, what have I done? How does it do it? Why do you get 4 answers that are the same using 4 lines that are somewhat different? So if you don't ask a question, that means that you have complete understanding of how this 7-line program works.
What did you call that technique again? Concatenation?
Concatenation.
Concatenation?
Concatenation.
Concatenation. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
That's fancy word for stuffing strings together. So this is the example of concatenation. This is an example of just passing multiple parameters. This is a simple example of an F string with a variable, and this is an F string with a calculation.
Ah,
And that's the way it is. And dot format, I can't mark wrong, but go ahead, use it if you want to. Now, there's more to this, but I don't want to get into it now.
mhm.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Did I answer the original question? Who asked me the question originally?
I think it's easier, looks easier to do F string with curly.
Yeah, it is. Yes. And once we get into formatting the output, that's even another compelling reason to do it. All right, so John, you're happy?
Yeah,
Cool. All right, how are we doing? I'm holding up. All right, so let's close this. Notice when I close the window, I don't get rid of the file. It just hangs around there. All right, next question.
you go back to that last screen again for a second.
No, it's gone. No.
Oh.
No, there we go.
How does it close out? Okay. Comma, okay, and then parentheses. All right.
Now,
That's
this is a poorly styled program. It doesn't have a header. It doesn't have comments. It doesn't have a main function. But that wasn't my purpose. Just want to show you how we could achieve the same effect. All righty. Next question.
So for your code to be correct, does it have to end with code 0 at the bottom when you're running it?
You mean line 8?
No, I'm saying for you to know that your code is correct,
Right.
does it have to end with
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
yes,
Yes.
process finished with exit code 0?
Yeah, that's more of a convention than a rule. And the convention is that programs that finish normally return an exit code 0. If the program crashes, let's see what we can do to crash this program and see what it says. Hey, that shouldn't work, should it? Aha. Now, here's a great example about how Python and PyCharm working together are trying to help you. I did something bad. Python, not PyCharm, Python says you had a 0 division error. You tried to divide by 0. And by the way, you did it on line 3. And by the way, this right here is where it blew up. And by the way, I'm going to tell PyCharm to display an exit code 1. So good point. Now, if some reason I want to play this game on my own, I can. Exit is a valid function built in. It will take a code. I can say I want to do an exit code 7. But I take out the divided by 0? I did. And there's my exit code 7. Now, normally you do that as a choice. You know, you have multiple paths through your program, and the bad choices would have a non-zero code. Good question. I like it. Next one.
I have a question, but it's not as much a coding question as it is a question about the class in a way.
I'll try.
It's just so I understand the concept of comments and what their purpose is, you know, you're explaining your code for someone else who has to use it so that they
Right.
can look and read and see what you're thinking and what you're trying to do and what everything does.
Yes.
But I also understand that part of our documenting is to you, Eric Mailman, who's you know, proctoring this class. How much should we write our code as if we're writing to another coder, and how much should we be talking to you in like the sense of explaining to you what we're trying to do for the purpose of the assignment?
Okay. See, I was in a little bit of a panic because I thought you wanted me to explain classes like how you create objects in Python. But that's not what you wanted. Okay, so let's tackle your question. I think the answer is kind of the same about whether you're writing to me or you're writing to another programmer. And the reason I say that is that I don't think in your comments you should be explaining Python. So it should not be written to, the average guy on the street, because that's not your audience. Yes, your audience is me in the case you submit it, someone else who might read it. Your audience is also you. As your program gets bigger and bigger, it's harder to find the pieces. And as a few days elapse, sometimes you forget why you were doing and what you were doing. Now let's get some takeaways from that. One takeaway is that you're not writing for English. So we're not looking for, what is it, SWE for standard written English. It shouldn't be illiterate, but it doesn't have to be complete English sentences. Commenting every line just creates clutter. Shorter is better once you've made your point. And more than that, let's see what we can do with this program. My other comment about comments is that single spaces are a beautiful thing to separate sections of code. It really helps your eyes not to get lost. Next question about comments is that inline comments are okay if they're really short. In general, I don't use them. In general, I'll write comments above what I'm commenting. So my comment here would be calculate miles driven, miles on gas. And don't keep going forever. You can always use it, go to another line by mole by mole. So not only will PyCharm do spell check, it'll also do grammar check. Capacity by miles per gallon. Okay, so that's commenting that section of code. Simplest comment, hashtag space. Easiest way to do it. Not only way to do it, but easiest way to do it. Comment, print. With your results. Several ways. Now, of course, part of your comments is really the header, and I chose not to do it that way. And that's, is that a good enough answer?
That's a very good answer. Yeah, so you're leaning more towards a naturalistic of like for your own use and for other coders' use, like as if you were coding in a real environment.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I can take off a point or two for lack of comments. If it was a big project and someone else was picking up your work, there could be much more serious consequences. Now, I guess I could tell a couple of quick stories. One is, and I don't remember where I read it as a comment on code, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. That may be an interesting comment, but not very helpful. The other story is that my friend who wrote part of an early operating system called Multics decided he was in an error condition that would never happen. So he wrote, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't a comment, it was an error message. He wrote an error message in Latin because he could. So what should have been a helpful description of the problem became an exercise in Latin when the problem occurred where he was nowhere in sight and people didn't know why the computer wouldn't come up. So there's no hard, fast rules. I can't give you a guideline. I can just tell you that the object is to make the code more readable to someone who understands the language. All right. Next question. So this is your class.
Mr. Memo, can you hear me good?
Yes, I can.
Just for the sake of relativity, because programming can be extremely intimidating, especially starting off for a lot of new people. Is there any way that when we're going through some of the modules or explaining some concepts, can you give us like real life scenarios where it may be applicable so that we can find relativity? Like, okay, I remember when Mr. Millman said this type of code or this type of, function is usually used in this real life scenario because of your work history.
I can. I think my first comment would be, no one's going to pay you on the job for a program that calculates the miles that you can drive on a tank. In other words, real life programs are much more complicated. So, I think it makes more sense to describe in comments, this is what you're going to do. I'm not even sure how I could make this any more relevant to my job experience by explaining this, other than, it's pretty easy to figure out that the miles driven is capacity times miles per gallon. So, yeah, I mean, I can try, but I don't think that's the key to success. I think the key to success is to find other programs or other sites that show you how this programming concept is used. So we will, after we do module 3, we'll get to module 4, which is on conditional statements. And those can be very complex. And more important than you learning or you hearing how I use them is reading about other examples of these. This is what you do with if statements and if else statements. So I agree with you that it's complex, but I think the examples come out of your learning materials. And I will make a couple of suggestions about that. Let me make a mark over here to cover that. So it's a good question. I mean, your broader question is, how do you learn programming? And how do you get your hands around something that is inherently complex, unforgiving in mistakes, and just keeps on getting more complex with every passing week? Does that help you at all?
Yes, I'm just thinking kind of like from the concept, like I know personally, I learned like, you may trip as a kid, you may fall, but it didn't stop you from crawling and walking and then running. So like someone that may run, you may be able to explain the concept better than someone that is crawling because you've crawled and you've walked before.
Yeah,
You get what I'm saying?
I agree with that.
You can get the concepts as in you can see someone do it, you can read about it, but seeing someone that's a little bit more tenured or seasoned on in the environment of whatever we're talking about, it's easier for you to maybe have some relativity that can express it better than someone newer.
I agree. I think it's good. I think it's better to have programs that have some real life applicability, or as you said, relevance. They can't be full-fledged programs at this point because they're too complicated. But let me, after our break, make a recommendation on a couple of learning resources and see if that might help you. One of which is actually a playlist on YouTube. The guy is all about examples. He's very good about that. And while I gather he's an accomplished programmer, I think he makes the basic concepts easy to understand. One problem you have with an accomplished programmer is that been there, done that. Anybody should know how to write an F string. Well, no, you're not born learning how to write an F string. So the problem you have with somebody with expertise and experience is sometimes it's hard to go back to the basic concepts. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. All right. So I'm in need of a break. Let's pause the recording. There we go. Let's get this screen share. Okay. And let's put this away for a moment. So we've kind of gotten to the topic of when you're getting started with programming, which is inherently complex. I found a lot of cases, myself included, where you'll listen to a lecture about something, read something. Yeah, I got it. You go to sit down and write a program. No, I don't got it. I frequently get comments from students. I don't know where to start. So let me just show you two resources here. And recommend them, actually, is what I'm going to do. So I'm looking under getting started. And I'm looking down at the bottom here at the ever popular day one form. And yeah, I'm being a bit sarcastic, but not really, because in addition to spelling out in this document, you know, what you can do wrong, also kind of tells you about ways of being successful. And I like to point you down here at this thing and notice that these links are not clickable. So if I download this, I'll find out that now these links are clickable. So has anybody taken a look at W3 Schools yet?
I have.
Like it, don't like it?
I like it.
Yeah, that's in general the comment I get from students. I didn't discover this site, students referred me to it. Not only does it have Python, but it also has all these other things. And they're organized in tutorials. So for instance, comments, well, here's a tutorial on comments. Variables, data types, numbers, casting, blah, 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 blah. We will very soon be getting into if-else constructs, and that's described here. So they have examples, they have a try it yourself. You can use their example and change it. So if you do try it yourself, this is like their Python environment. Not a great one, but good one. So B is greater than A, that's true. Change the program, run it again. Jeez. It's not like I was asking you to do a lot of work. All right, that's what happens when you don't practice things before. I have no idea why this does not seem to be running. But anyway, that's the concept. You can take their examples and you can change them. So much for that demo. Very extensive. I would say, aside from the GUI stuff that we're going to do at the end of the class, there's nothing that we are going to do that isn't described someplace in here. So let's take a look at the other one, which is really, really different. And these have been out there for a long time. It's getting to be a decade, but not really much has changed in terms of basic Python. So this is done by a programmer whose name is Bucky Roberts. I think a programmer of some repute, but I think that his strength in our environment is taking concepts and reducing them to a clear explanation in 10 minutes or less. So if you go down his playlist, you'll see that none of them are really more than 10 minutes. And you'll see that some of them get a little off track. My trip to Walmart and sets. So he likes pulling in examples, usually relevant ones, sometimes irrelevant ones. But take a look at his count. I mean, all these counts are 200, 300,000. Go back to the beginning, they're more like 1 million. So he will take you through installing Python, talking about numbers, talking about strings, talking about lists. Then I don't know why he doesn't do this first, how to install PyCharm. And this is where we're going after module 3, talking about if, else. So I like these tutorials because he takes simple examples, he tries to make them relevant and shows you how they work. It's not an academic approach to things. It's a very practical approach to things. I may have mentioned, and I think it's silly, that one of the instructors objected to some of his language. You let me know if you find any language that he uses that you really find objectionable. His examples tend to revolve around food and old girlfriends. So that's the way it is. Probably more about food. So that's a couple of recommendations on learning resources. Of course, what's in D2L is a lot of learning resources, right? Where am I here? So if you go into the module that we're going to do next on input and output, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see, in this case, a module or a submodule on input and another one on output, and you're going to see an assignment. So certainly don't overlook the course material. We did the intro module, and there was a thing here on variables and syntax and math operators, a cheat sheet. Oh, by the way, don't overlook the cheat sheet, right? So this is not learning documentation, it's reference documentation. But once you kind of get a little idea about what's going on, this cheat sheet on two sides of the paper can be pretty helpful. Any other resources that anybody's found that you'd like to mention to people? Or where do you go when you're stuck?
I email my instructor.
That works sometimes, assuming your instructor can see stuff. Yeah. Yes, email instructor. Not only that, in this case, email instructor, the simplest thing is to cut and paste your source code into the email. You can attach a PY file, but then Outlook thinks you're trying to do something nasty and won't open it for you, and I forward it to my own email address. So you can attach your PY file, but just copy and paste works fine. And then I can run it. The whole point of me helping you and grading your stuff is that I can run your code, which I do. We had many fights when I was full-time at Dell Tech about courses that auto-grade assignments. Hate them. Students hate them. They don't provide the interactivity and the insight that you really need. All they're doing is if the answer is supposed to be 14.7, it's right. If you give them the answer 14.7.0, it's wrong. If you give them the answer 14.6, that's wrong in two cases, but it doesn't know. All it knows is it doesn't match. All right, enough blabbing about that. So let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. And let's go on to the next question.
I don't want to jump in front of anybody, but I also had an error code at the end of mine. Like, how do you define main? Like when you finish a program, I run if name equals, and then
yeah, I'm with you. Hold on, I just have to lower the shades here. It's gotten sunny. And let's shut this. That's better. Oh, okay. So let me answer your question in two pieces. One is, this is not my preferred style. My preferred style is, your question was, how do you define main? And the answer is DEF main, empty parentheses, colon, and everything. Now, PyCharm says, why don't you have the indentation that I expected? So right now you've created a function that has no content because Python takes indentation as an indication of content. So now I have a function called main. And if I run it, nothing happens. All right, we've been here before. Why does nothing happen?
Because you never executed the function?
Yeah, I defined a function, period. I defined a function, never executed it. So the second part of your question had to do with the if main. And this is a case where just let PyCharm do the work for you. Explaining it and remembering it is just a waste of time. So what I'm going to do with no indentation is I'm just going to type the lowercase m. PyCharm is going to say, hey, I got some things that I know about that start, or that have an M in them, actually. This one looks interesting because we've seen it before. So we'll just double click on it. PyCharm will fill the line in, include a colon. It's an if statement. The operation is equals for a test of equality. And line 15 is indented. Well, what do you want to do if that equality is true? Well, let me type the letter M again, and it says, would you like to run the main function? And the answer is yes. PyCharm says, hey, I expected 2 lines, and I only found 1, fine. Who says? Pep8 says there should be 2 lines. And if we click over here, we get a green check mark. And if we click this, we run the program. That answer your question?
Yes,
All right.
I just didn't define it at the beginning, that's all.
Right. So, I mean, that's the other problem. If you do this, then you're going to get an error over here. I don't know what you're talking about. So, yeah. And the other thing is that there's nothing sacred about the name main. So you can do this and the program should run correctly.
Okay.
Has nothing to do with line 15. So in general, you know, there's plenty of room for creativity in any programming language without violating what becomes conventional, which is the main function is called main. Okay. More questions?
Do you have a like, so this is also not really in the confines of the class and what we're doing, but a little bit outside, but do you have any preferred way to like run Python programs yourself for like, if you were making Python programs for yourself, like how do you use them?
How do I run them?
Yeah.
Just the same way we've been doing it. I do it in PyCharm. And the newer versions of PyCharm have an option up here for current file, which means the green arrow will work on whichever tab is highlighted. So that's kind of what I do.
Okay. Yeah. I just, the little window at the bottom always seemed a little unsatisfying for me, but I guess that's just,
You mean
Taste.
the result window?
yeah. I know you can make it bigger.
Unsatisfying in what sense?
I don't know, just I guess an aesthetic sense. I guess I'm just, it just didn't seem right, but I guess that's just a feeling.
Well, I mean, it's the best PyCharm can do in a console or text mode program. When we get to talk about GUI programs, the whole idea of print and input go away. And as does the window at the bottom. Unless you need it as a programmer, it's not part of the solution. So there are other environments that you can work in. I should probably mention one more thing because I saw it in somebody's submission. It wasn't the correct thing to do at the time, but nonetheless, let's take a look. It's called the Python console. And for some reason, and I forgot the acronym, this is referred to as REPL, and I don't remember why. What in the world is it? Well, it's a sort of a single line Python environment. So you don't really run a program, you really write Python statements. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's say A equals 5. And it says nothing. Over here, it says, and I don't think I can make this window bigger, I can't. It says you've created a variable called A and its current value is the integer 5. B equals 7.5. You've created a float, 7.5. Well, what is A plus B? A plus B is 12.5. So could you print A plus B? Sure, I can. The answer is 12.5. So this is kind of like a single line way of testing things out. It's here. It comes off of the symbol called the Python console.
Yeah, I think this is more what I was thinking. So I'm just guessing you could like run your programs and functions off of this console as well.
I
No?
don't see any
Okay.
point to it.
I know. I kind of like a command line. I think that was what I was looking for almost.
Right, and this is a command line mode. There are courses that are written around the Python console. And there are other courses that are written around a thing called Jupyter Notebook. Anybody had an experience with Jupyter Notebooks? That's a whole environment, including a whole different GUI that kind of combines the idea of a program with command lines. And it takes programs and you can divide them into independent modules, which to me is funky. I'm trying to see the program as a program, and it's trying to split them up into these independent modules that don't naturally split. But some people love it. So be it. Now, just to go a little further into your question, we love the green arrow, but we should also love this guy, the bug, the green bug. The green bug is another mode of running your programs under the control of I guess it's a PyCharm program. Yeah, I'm a hedging on that. I forget. Run your program under another program called a debugger. So let's do that. This line got more complicated. It looks like it's part of PyCharm. The result is the same. I connected to the PyDev debugger, blah, blah, blah. Well, that was a lot of work for nothing, right? I didn't get anything else out of it. But I could. And the way that I can is by selecting a line in my program. Let's select line 6. And if I click on it, it'll highlight in kind of a dark red. That's called a breakpoint. And that's where you really want to use the debugger, because now if I run debug, when I get to that point, when and if I get to line 6, before I enter lines, before I execute line 6, the debugger stops my program and displays stuff like the variables that exist. Notice miles doesn't exist yet. So I can get information this way. Notice you also get some light colored hints in your code done by the debugger. So at this point, I can run my program one line at a time. I can run it until I get to the next debug point. For instance, let me set line 9 and let me rerun. I don't want to rerun as much as I want to resume. So now that I'm down here, notice there's now a variable for miles. So that's another answer to your question about how I might run a program, particularly if it's gotten big or I'm confused about why is this program doing or not doing what it's supposed to. If you set a debug point and it never trips, then you're not doing what you wanted to do, right? Why is there code there that never got executed? So the debugger gives you a lot of information if you use it. And I guess the biggest advertisement I have for the debugger is it can't hurt. You know, you can't break anything by using it. All righty, more questions?
The else part of an if-else statement.
I'm waiting for the question.
So the else part of an if else statement is what? If this is true, then it's gonna print, but if it's not, else is like a secondary command.
Else, so, and we'll talk a lot about this in module 4. If statements come in 3 versions, one of them you're looking at in lines 15 and 16. If that's true, then run main. We're done. If you want to do something, if it's false, that's when you write an else. So the expression after an if must evaluate to true or false. And it doesn't take much to realize if it's not true, it's false. So the conclusion is that else never has an expression after it. Might as well do it here, right? Notice that PyCharm thinks I'm still writing the if clause, but I'm not. You want to write an else clause. That else clause never has a condition. So the complete line is else colon, and here is something else to do. This is not the module with main. So that's an example of how to use an if else. I must execute one of those branches, guaranteed. And it doesn't just have to do with print statements. So let's talk about the concept of containers. Well, for better or worse, you know the containers hold things. The trouble with programming is that there's different kinds of containers. There's containers that hold data, like capacity, holds the value 15. There are containers that hold lists of values in Python 4 different ways. There are containers that hold code. That's what the colon is about. Any line that ends in a colon is a code container. Its contents is everything that's indented under it. And lastly, there's a GUI container that holds GUI elements. More about that later on. So does that answer your question about if else?
Yeah.
So what about if there's more than a true false thing that you need to test? That's why we have the keyword elif. And elif is the Python way of saying else if. So if you want to do that, your first check is if, your second, third, fourth, fifth is elif, and your last one, if you want to, is else. So elifs and ifs always have conditions. Else never has a condition. Good question. A little ahead of where we are, but that's fine. Nobody said we can't take a look ahead. Okay. More questions? See, I had a concept for this class, for this session, that I was just going to go down the attendee list and ask everybody individually what their question was. But then I decided that that may be too scary, potentially for both of us. All right, anything else? All right, so let me go back and ask the question that I think at least one of you should have had. And that's, can you show me again how to submit my file? That's the question. Does anybody have that question? Will anybody admit to having that question?
I do, but I was gonna wait till after class to ask it, honestly.
So you made the mistake of, I'm the only person who doesn't understand this.
Yes.
Yes, and the answer is you're not. I know that for a fact. So let's take a look together and then we can all see it. And the important thing here is that I'm on as a student because of different things happen to me and happen with you as students. So let's take a look at, it doesn't matter, Module 3. So Module 3 has an assignment, and it's fair to say that an assignment typically implies something that needs to be submitted. And all of these things are built out of a template. What to do and why, how to do it. This is the section. Why is that in blue? This is the section that you must understand before you tackle the problem. And if we have some time today, maybe we'll talk about this a little more. But anyway, here's what it might look like. And here's a link over here to submitting assignments. This is in general, it's not for this specific assignment. They then proceed to go through what I think is possibly the most complicated way to achieve this. So maybe not so much recommended by me. So let's see if we can get back to here. And that's not where I want it to be. Let's click on, well, let's see what we have over here. View, no. Assignment, maybe. And I just had this before, so I'm hoping I can find it again. Ah, there we go. So I clicked on the assignment, and now I see the same stuff I see before. I would say it's fair to say that all the information that you're looking at here is important to the task at hand. You need to read this carefully before you write any code. You probably should read this carefully before you open PyCharm. If something doesn't make sense, figure out the answer before you start. So at some point, I've written a program. And now I get down here to submissions and notice that this is an active drop area. Drop files here or click below. So I can go into upload, but maybe I can make my life easy. And I think there are plenty of difficult things in a programming class without making your life more difficult. So why don't I be optimistic and say, hey, this looks like a file explorer. It's actually a project explorer, but maybe it's smart enough to take my PY file and dump it into here. Looking good, right? So if I dump it into there, I've now attached my PY file. I could write comments. Maybe you'd want to write comments if something's not working. Worst comes to worst, you could copy and paste code into here, but you shouldn't have to. So now that I have an attached PY file, I just hit submit. And that's it. Confirmation email sent. Okay. So in my mind, that's the easiest way to submit your PY file. Very, very important. I do not want from this point, well, from the first assignment forward, I do not want screenshots of code. It's not useful to me. I can't run it. And it's painful to figure out what's wrong with a program from a screenshot. So the only thing I want is a .py file. And I appreciate that. And eventually, well, actually, I started doing it already. The only thing I'll grade is a .py file. I won't grade a submission based on a screenshot. Did that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, there's bunches of other ways of doing it. I need to know, or what I'm really doing is I'm looking at this path up here. Notice it's an absolute path. And if I were to go over here, right click and say, I want to open in Explorer, I get a Windows view of this. And I could click this and use this path and put this on the end of it. Yeah, I don't know why that would be any better. The other thing you can do is you can right click on your file and say copy path and reference, which is what the D2L suggests. Say you want an absolute path. And then when you upload, I believe, let's see if I can get into trouble or not. I can paste that and say open, and I will attach it that way. But, you know, they give you a drag and drop. Go for it. Okay. More questions? All right, let me get a sip of seltzer.
I do have one question. One more. It might be a two.
That's what we're here for. Well, that was William, I believe. Where'd you go, William? Huh. Okay. If it was William and you got interrupted, well, if it was William, I can't hear you. If
Can
you're
you hear
still,
me now?
yeah, now I can hear you.
Sorry about that. Okay. So let's just I'll just say, let's say everyone in here wanted to be a programmer. From your years of programming experience, what makes someone stand out as a programmer other than studying material and stuff like that? Like studying, what causes someone to be like, you know, more knowledgeable or even higher paid programmer compared to, you know, if we're just starting?
So that's a very broad question. And of course, I have an opinion. My first reaction is something that someone said to me who was a new hire. And I don't remember it was after he was brought on or if it was in his interview. And I was very much in favor of this guy. He said to me, he says, they don't pay us for what we know, they pay us for what we can figure out. It's impossible to learn what you need, just about any skill, particularly programming, before you start a job that is going to be immediately applicable to the job. So the job is always not what you studied for. And I'll save you some boring examples of that. So it's what you can figure out. So one answer to the question is, if you can be assigned an assignment that you don't know and you can figure out the answer, that's a good thing. If you can't, that's a bad thing. If the answer is poor, that's a bad thing. If the answer could be done better by a more senior person, that's okay. You're not a senior person. So I think in general, you're rewarded for what you can figure out. That largely means, where can I go to get the resources I need? Companies won't pay you to do something that's already been done. And having your office mate do it for you won't work because he's got his own work to do. And he probably doesn't know how to do it either. So for my first assignment on the job, it occurred to me how completely ill-prepared I was for it. Absolutely, completely ill-prepared. And my choice was go to my boss and admit defeat, or sit there and figure it out. So I figured it out. It wasn't very good. It wasn't a great solution, but it worked well enough to give him the idea that I could figure stuff out. So that's kind of my answer. Who gets paid more? The people who get paid more are the people who have knowledge that is specialized enough that not everybody can do it. But as a programmer, you'll get paid well. You won't get paid a ridiculous amount of money, but you will get paid well, and there's a lot of upscale potential. So when I was still working in Wilmington, we had connections with employers in the area, and one of them was, I forgot, one of the banks there. And I asked a manager, says, well, what would you pay for somebody with a degree out of Deltech? So an associate's degree, not a bachelor's degree, you know, who seemed to be a good programmer. And his answer was probably between 60 and 80K. which ain't bad for starters, even at 60K. Now, why is he willing to pay that money? Because not everybody can do it. You know, if he could walk down to the corner of Wedgema Street and Wedgema Street and find somebody there who could do it, you know, if he's generous, he'd pay them $30,000, $40,000. If he has to go looking for the right person, he's going to pay more because that person can get a job someplace else. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that helps a lot. And I like how you kind of explain it like a programmer with your if statements.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the way you tend to map things into that. And you tend to, look at things that are run by a computer and kind of see the program that's behind it, because there have to be if statements, and there has to be calculations, and there has to be different modules that do different things, and there have to be error statements, and you don't want to know about crashes. So how do I prevent it? And things like that.
Truly appreciate it.
Sure. All right. Other questions? So let
I'm
me
just curious about how long it takes to become proficient in Python.
forever, because it keeps growing. So Python does usually in September an annual major release. So right now we're running 3.11. I don't know when 3.12 will be officially released, but I'm sure there's trial copies out of there. One of the things they'll do is they'll introduce new stuff. So F strings are new stuff. We'll discuss under conditionals something relatively new called match case. And there's also always principles that can be used if you know them. So, I've had students after our 15-week class who do a great job who knew nothing coming in. Does that mean they're done learning? No. It means they did a good job using and extending what we are able to do in a 15-week class. And who says that the best language for whatever someone's willing to pay me for is going to be Python? So it may be important for me to say, yes, I know Python, but now I have to learn some other language.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay. And I'm doing well enough I can hang in there until 10:20 and maybe beyond. We'll see. Let's talk about module 3. So as I said, fairly straightforward. Input, output, assignment. I've already, as you know, I hope, I've already released the video, which I did before my cataract stuff, so I could still see. So the video is out there available to you. It's a pretty modest module. Technically, I don't think it's very hard, which I won't say about module 4. Module 4, there's not that many commands in there, but it is technically complex. So my proposal, and I guess we're not going to vote on it because I want to try it and see how it goes. So this is my plan for Wednesday. Before class on Wednesday, I want you to watch the video. It's only an hour. And I want you to read through the module in D2L. In the class on Wednesday, I want to give you most of the class time, maybe all of the class time, to work on module 3, on the assignment for module 3. Can you get it done in an hour or two? Maybe. Can you get a substantial start on it? Definitely. And this is the way I want to do it. I want to do it in breakout rooms of 2 people. Why? Because I want you to be in a small group, not a big group where you can hide. And I want you to have the other person to bounce your ideas off of. The advantage of doing it in class time on Wednesday is that you can ask me for help whenever you want. I don't know where to get started. I did this and now I'm getting this error. We're stuck. We think we got it. Can we go home now? And the answer is yes. If you complete the assignment, just go ahead and submit it. And you'll also have a head start on the due date, which of course is the end of the day Sunday. So that's my plan for Wednesday. And then next week, we can probably get back to the normal flow of things. Although, if I'm absolutely thrilled and you're thrilled with the way things go Wednesday, maybe we can try this again to have the video beforehand and then use the class time for going over it. The intent of Zoom classes is not for me to talk the whole time. But I've not heard any really good suggestions about what to do otherwise. And I've done breakout rooms and they don't work perfectly, but let's give it a try with this group with a specific task, which is do the Module 3 assignment, see how it works. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Give us a preview on the project.
The project or the Module 3 assignment?
Oh, the project.
Gee, I don't know. Let me take a look. Where is the project? Project is in Module 6. Project rate calculation program. You're a little bit ahead of me on this because I don't remember exactly what's in here, and some of these are new. Have you read over this project?
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about it?
Is it asking us to enter grades into Python and then put a yes and a no answer?
Well, certainly you're supposed to be entering grades. The problem is you don't know how many students you're grading. So you have to have a way of stopping. And that's what they said, to exit, enter a -1 or something like that. And I think I'd do a better job if I had read this before. And then there is a prompt to want to know if you want to continue entering grades. So what's the -1 for? To exit entering grades for the student. Oh, you don't know how many grades are entered for each student. So there's two levels here. A student, you may be entering multiple grades. When you're done with that student, enter -1. And if you want to enter the grades for more students, then you have a different prompt where you type a yes. If you type a no, it should end. And here's an example, a sample output. So what's this? Just a print statement. This is an input statement. This is just a print statement with a hint. And here are the grades for John with a -1 at the end. And here you're keeping track of what grade number it is. So when you're done with John, it prints his name, gives you the average, not including the -1, and then says that that's excellent. And then whether you continue or not. Now, this has a lot of parts to it that we haven't covered yet. So if you don't know how to do this program right now, that's because we're not close to Module 6 yet. And notice that this is not due until October 8th. So that's almost a month from now. Did that help you at all?
Yeah, that helped.
Okay. So Again, the most important thing about the assignments or projects is read the whole thing, probably twice. Make note of anything that you don't understand and make sure you have a plan before you begin work as to what you need to do and what you need to find out. So I always take this as the trip to Home Depot problem. I have a project and I'm going to go to Home Depot. What is it that I need? And it's in my best interest to get that all when I get to Home Depot, not to come home and find out I need to go back again. Okay. So plan for, ideally, the plan for Wednesday is to have you at the end of the class have finished the assignment. This is the first assignment where we're providing you with no starting code. So how do you start? Well, maybe you just want to copy one of your old assignments. Oh, a comment. Since you're going to be working in groups, and since this is a pretty simple assignment, I'm not going to enforce the two of you can't submit the same thing. So you can submit the same thing if you note that you worked on this cooperatively with blah, blah, blah. Now, if both of you submit the same wrong thing, well, then you both get the same bad grade. So pretty simple. There's not a lot of different ways of doing it. So feel free to make this actually a collaborative assignment. And, be fair, make sure you're participating in the discussion. Don't assume that the other person is better at it than you, and you'll have time to ask questions. All righty, so we're about at the end of our time. Any other questions quickly?